Thank you. They had a lot of questions, but housing kept coming up. They were saying housing was too expensive, rents were too high. A lot of them said Massachusetts was just simply too unaffordable for them. They also touched on the fact that they lived hours away from their communities that they worked in. While it was a great conversation, a lot of the attendees did not know where to go for these problems. Sure, there was Jake Auchincloss in Congress, but not everyone knew that so much about the housing affordability crisis is down to the local level, the town level, and the city level. And it was clear that many of you simply had the will to solve the problem, but did not know who to turn to or where to turn to. And this is reflected at municipal meetings where our generation is really not represented and the people who go are of a different generation. And this is why we decided to have this event where we can let our young professionals know how they can lend their voice in housing advocacy. So for the agenda, just after this, we will hear from a housing expert. Later, we will have a developer speak about a municipal hearing next week that could really benefit from some community assistance. And then we will end with some Q&A and a quick testimonial from a young professional who is also a housing advocate. But before we start with that, I wanted to share a quick poll to get a sense of everyone's experience with housing advocacy and where everyone sits. So I'm going to launch this right now, and I would love to see you fill it out. And if you all see this, it'd be great if you can answer the questions. The first is, how many of you are worried about your ability to purchase or rent a house or an apartment? The second one is, how many of you have attended a municipal meeting? And the third one is, how many of you have attended a hearing about housing and zoning reform specifically? So we'll wait a little bit to let these results come in and I'll share them. And okay, I think we have enough results. And if everyone can see the results, I hope they can. It seems like pretty much everyone is worried about their ability to purchase and rent a house. The affordability crisis is definitely being felt here, but not equal numbers have attended a municipal meeting and especially not have attended a zoning or housing reform meeting. So it just goes to show you there is a little bit of a disconnect between the issue and how we interact with it in our government. Okay. With that, I would like to introduce Rachel Heller, the CEO at CHAPA, Citizens Housing and Planning Association. Rachel and CHAPA do great work around housing, and I'm excited to hear what she has to present. So Rachel, I'll turn it over to you. You can share your screen.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, for a second, I saw myself freeze, so sorry about that. I'm Rachel Heller, the CEO at CHAPA, Citizens Housing and Planning Association. We are a statewide nonprofit that brings many stakeholders together all across the state to advocate for opportunity. We do this at every level. We do this at the state level, local level, regionally with our New England counterparts, and at the federal level. We bring a bunch of people together, different stakeholders, to expand access to housing, to make sure that as we are growing our housing supplies, we're adding affordable homes, that people have access to this. They can find it, they can apply for it if it's an affordable home, and that the resources exist to help people become homeowners if that's their dream, or have a safe, healthy, affordable home in the community that they choose. And we develop the field. And what this means is we do a lot of trainings. We will bring in experts on a whole range of topics so that the affordable housing and community development field and local advocates are all learning the information that we need to advocate for the changes that we need, to implement a lot of the laws like the MBTA Communities Act that I'll talk about, and to build the kinds of homes that people need. So I am going to talk for a few minutes just about why we are where we are, and the importance of your voice. Before I get started, though, I want to acknowledge my amazing colleagues who are in this meeting. I have Whitney Demetrius here. She is the Director of Fair Housing and Municipal Engagement, And Sade Ratliff is also in the meeting. And there she is waving. And Sade is I almost blank on your title, I'm sorry, Municipal Engagement Program Associate. So Sade is working with communities all over the state, really helping to change the conversation at the local level. And then I also want to add that though not here, I need to acknowledge Lily Link because she is our MBTA Communities Engagement Manager, and I am using one of the amazing presentations that she created with a few tweaks that I made to it. So I want to make sure that she gets acknowledgement for that. So I will share my screen. I will give a brief presentation, but really want to make this conversational and leave plenty of time for questions and answers. Okay, do you actually see the presentation that I want to be showing, which is making the case for housing? Is that what you see, Max? Greg is, okay, great,
Yes, looks good.
Great. So we are going to talk about making the case and how you can make sure that you are part of the conversation at the local level, and we are seeing the kinds of changes that we need. But first, to start off with, why is it so expensive to live in this great state? And it really goes back, sorry, to a series of intentional choices that have been being made and in our communities at the local level that have made it harder and harder to create the kinds of homes that we need. So when you look at this chart, you can see at one point, Massachusetts was rocking. We were going right along, adding homes. And in the 1980s, we were actually pretty on like middle of the road when it came to home prices and rents. We were on par with other states. We were also producing double the number of homes then that we are today. So as you can imagine, as our population is growing and we are not adding to our housing stock like we were in the past, we're going to run into a lot of challenges. So first, one of those challenges is that we have high home prices. This is a big consequence of the choices that we have made. So that means that right now, 1 in 12 people in the greater Boston area actually has the income needed to become a homeowner. When you look at these home prices, $961,000, that's from June, was the median sale price for a single family home, $750,000 for a condo. This means that people need to be earning $200,000 to $300,000 to enter the home ownership market. That's a lot higher than our incomes. As you can see, that only 1 in 12 Boston residents has that income to be able to support it. But it's also interesting because a lot of people who became homeowners a while ago could not actually rebuy the homes that they live in today. Home prices have just gone so far beyond what the growth in incomes has done. Not having enough homes also means people are coming from further away. Max was talking about how people brought this up in the meeting with Congressman Auchincloss. People are having to travel much further. This is not good for our lives. Who wants to spend this much time in traffic? 134 years is, 134 hours a year is how long people are spending in traffic in their cars. That means that people are not out enjoying life, being with their families, going to local restaurants and businesses. That's way too much time in the car. Also not good for our environment. And then out-migration. We are losing people from this great state. Massachusetts is an amazing place where the reason why we're so amazing is really because of the people who make up this state and who have such great values and ideals for what our community and state should look like and be like. And we're losing people. And in particular, we are losing 25 to 45-year-olds. That is a big cause for concern. You all are the future of our state, and we cannot afford to lose a whole group of people. The Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce did a survey. Let's check in with this age group and let's see what's going on. Well, 1 in 4 people plan to leave Boston, Greater Boston, in the next 5 years. That is not a good plan for our state. We need to do something to make sure that people don't leave because of the reasons cited: cost of rents, availability of jobs that pay what people need to be able to afford to live here. These are not reasons. We can solve that and make sure that people, if they choose to leave, it's for other reasons. Maybe it's the weather, but that they want to stay here and that they can stay here. Young people want local leaders to prioritize affordable housing. And going back to that poll, that Max just showed, we have a lot of room for growth there. If in this group, about half the attendees have gone to local meetings, great. That means we can get all of you to attend local meetings. And now our local leaders are hearing from people about why housing is so important. And that's a real game changer when it comes to how they think about these issues. The Retailers Association of Massachusetts also did a survey, and they found that 70% of small business owners plan to sell or retire in the next decade. Who will be our next generation of business owners if we actually have people in the 25 to 45-year-old band leaving Massachusetts? And that's why we really need you to speak up. Housing, as Max mentioned, is really, the decisions are made at the local level. A lot of important policies are passed at the state level and the federal level, and the funding that makes homes affordable. Ultimately, it's at the local level in each of our communities where decisions are being made about what can be built, what can't be built, and that translates into who can live there and who cannot. So it's really important that we are all speaking up. We're all part of this process. There's an amazing study that was done by Dr. Catherine Einstein and her colleagues at Boston University. They analyzed hundreds of meetings throughout Eastern Massachusetts. They're all about housing and land use. And they looked at who's showing up and what is the prevailing viewpoints. And they found that attendees are overwhelmingly older, whiter, and are homeowners. And this is, while an important group, does not represent the diversity of our demographics. It does not represent the diversity of viewpoints or life experiences. And imagine being a local leader and just hearing from one group of people who are largely anti-development. That can be very challenging to actually make decisions that are different than what you are hearing when, again, over and over at every meeting. They found it's about 86% of people who have been showing up at local meetings during the time of their study are against development. Now, interestingly, we did a follow-up study with the researchers at Boston University, and it was about how we make these processes more equitable and more inclusive. And they found in places like Newton, where focus groups were done of people who are not typically represented in public meetings, that the numbers flipped. Instead of having 85, 86% of people against development, you are now seeing 85 to 100% of people for development. So it just shows when you're talking to different groups of people that make up our communities, we need to hear all of these voices in order to make better decisions that meet the needs of people in our communities or the needs of people who would like to be living in our communities. And as residents, you really have a very powerful voice. Whether you're a resident or you're working in a community, you have a story to tell, a very important story that needs to be part of this local process. And I just want to talk about, actually, before I even get into how you can make your voice heard, just the real importance of it. It's not just the numbers that I was talking about, but to illustrate some examples. So there was a local meeting in a community that's right outside of Boston, and somebody talked about how much they're paying in rent. And people in the room actually couldn't believe it. They thought, oh, you're choosing to live in a luxury apartment building. And nope, standard 2-family, live upstairs, hasn't been updated in a while. And people, their neighbors really did not fully understand because they hadn't been renters in a long time. They'd been making their mortgage payments. They had not rented their homes out. They did not have an understanding. That is a wake-up call, and it also helps people understand. We've heard in some communities, my kids can't afford to live here anymore, or they're in my basement, and I would like them to be able to have a place of their own. That helps people to see, why is that happening? Their incomes do not match what the rents are, or the challenges of becoming a homeowner. These are really important stories to tell because, again, when policymakers, whether it's a select board or a city council or your planning board, are only hearing from one voice or even a small group of voices, they're not getting this story. And it's just really important to share that because, again, that's what we want in their minds when they're making decisions. Am I going to vote for this development? Am I going to vote for this inclusionary zoning policy? I'm hearing all these no's, but wait, I'm hearing some stories now that are telling me something's different, and I need to pay attention to that, and I need to think about the future of my community. So how can you make your voice heard? Because I would just say it's not a natural thing for us to all engage in local government. It's not necessarily set up in a way that it's very user friendly, where a big message goes out that there's a meeting tonight. And in going to a meeting, it can often feel like I don't know how to act. I don't know what to say. I don't know when I'm allowed to. There's all of these rules that are set up about public comments. So we understand that, okay, you haven't gone to a public meeting before. Let's help you figure out how to do that. One thing is to connect with people who are already doing it. So there's often local housing coalitions. There's affordable housing trusts in many communities, community development corporations. I recommend checking out a meeting of any of these groups because it can help you to see, okay, what's going on here? Is this something that I would like to help out with? Okay, and there's some neighbors that I can start to learn from and connect with. Also, get involved with municipal government. When I've lived in a lot of places in the greater Boston area, and it's completely tied to housing costs. Just to give a quick tour, I started off in Jamaica Plain, JP, a long time ago, lost my home because I was renting and they were selling it. And then I went to Southie, then I went to Revere, then I went to Cambridge and Brighton. Then I went to Somerville. I couldn't afford Somerville anymore when I needed a bigger place. And now I'm in Belmont. When I first got to Belmont, it wasn't a community where I thought I would ever live. And I really felt the responsibility to get involved locally and make sure that this community that I knew was quite affluent needed to have opportunities for more people to be able to live there. And so I said, okay, I'm going to get involved. I had no clue what that meant. I had never lived in a town before. I didn't understand what the processes were. But I decided to get involved in their housing trust. Little did I know 2 years later I'd be co-chairing it. But it was a really great way to get involved. I learned a lot and I'm still involved and we're actually making a lot of progress. So get involved. There's a lot of ways to do that. You can also run for office. You can run for office, you can get appointed to different positions. Definitely consider that because we need people in these roles who have different experiences, who represent different perspectives. Not only is it important for your voice to be heard at a public meeting, but it's important for your perspective to be part of the decision-making process at the decision-making table. So think about that. Also attend meetings early and as often as you can. There are a lot of meetings. These processes that we have set up in our communities can be very long. It can take, we're going to hear from a developer soon. It can take a very long time to go from concept to having shovels in the ground. There's a lot of opportunities along the way to be weighing in, to be that voice of saying, yes, I want to see this. Oh, now we're getting to the site plan process. Great. I want to make sure that this project is going to move forward and I'm going to offer up some helpful words to get it through quickly. Max, did you have a question?
I just wanted to quickly butt in because you're talking about a developer. We have a
Yeah,
developer right here on the line who has to speak right now. But
excellent.
if
Let's do it.
Michaela, you want to
Yeah.
speak
Hey,
about an
everyone.
opportunity this week or next week, rather.
Yeah, this is actually pretty timely. And Rachel, thank you so much. Everyone, hi, everyone. I'm Michaela DeSantis. I'm with Boylston Properties, and I apologize for jumping in. I had a last minute meeting come up in Watertown. So I have to be over at City Hall there at 2 o'clock. So appreciate you letting me have the floor now for a few minutes. Um, I'm permitting a 40B project, 295 units in Newton. And Rachel, to your point, well, I started in development probably 7, 8 years ago, but hadn't attended any meetings myself. And I started off with Avalon Bay, which does strictly multifamily. But seeing that, as soon as I became a developer, I was like, holy cow, like everyone in the room who's giving their public opinion, it just tends to be of a certain demographic and they're older. So I started going to meetings and I recently moved from the city to the burbs and I'm in a community where the planning board's working on their zoning compliance with the MBTA Communities Act, and I try to go and attend those meetings and give a younger person's perspective. So my sort of plug and ask to anyone in this group. So I'm permitting a 40B in Newton right now. It's 295 units. As we all know, we're in a housing crisis, much needed housing. It's a transit oriented development. It's quarter of a mile to the Newtonville commuter rail stop, all the amenities that Newtonville has to offer, the 2 grocery stores, they got the Whole Foods, lots of local businesses, food and beverage and other service businesses. And yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if any of you have So we have our 7th ZBA hearing next week, but at the community meetings and at the ZBA, it's you look at who's speaking. And I will age myself. I am 35 and everyone is a lot older than me. It's just fascinating. So we think we're almost there, and we may have a few more hearings, but we think this could be the last chance for public comment. And we have had support. And Rachel, to your point about getting involved in groups, if you haven't been to one of these before, so there's you just have to you can Google it and probably figure it out pretty easily. But in Newton, there's Engine 6 and Green Newton, and these are housing advocacy groups. And those are great groups to get involved with. Any folks we've met with individually in Newton who are supportive of the project, we sort of referred them to these groups to learn more. That is a great place to get started. But yeah, we're planning to build and hope we can get approved 295 units. 59 would be affordable at deeper affordability at 50% of the area median income, which is lower than what you typically see with a 40B, which is at 80% of the area median income. And the project will be built to passive house standards. And we've made a lot of meaningful changes along the way since we filed last December. So again, to Rachel's point, like, these are very long processes. We're in front of the ZBA every month. There's a little bit of comment fatigue from the sort of naysayers and folks who are opposing it. So again, we think next Wednesday night, it's really the last, we kind of hope, and it could be the last chance for public comment. So any support we can drum up and generate from those who are pro-housing and part of the chamber would be greatly appreciated. And Greg and Max have the info. You can attend in person or you can attend by Zoom. And in terms of the rules, Newton, the ZBA runs a great process. You get 3 minutes to speak. You're capped when you're done. They move on to the next person. And yeah, I mean, it's providing housing on what's currently an underutilized industrial site. There's 0 green space on it today. We're going to add, close to 40,000 square feet of green space and housing that we all need. And that's really the plug. Max and Greg, if you could sort of feel free to shoot out the info I sent you guys whenever that was earlier in the week to those on the call. And yeah, would appreciate any support.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Michaela. We will definitely send out the information for that meeting next Wednesday. And we would love to see as much attendance as we can. And I'll send it back to Rachel right now.
Hey, Matt, if I could just jump in for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to stress that you do not need to be a resident of Newton to be heard at these things or in any of these communities. I think that's a really important part of this.
That's correct.
That's correct. You can go to a meeting like this and say, I wish I could live in Newton. I wish I could work in Newton, but I can't because you're not creating the housing opportunities for me. And that's truly the only way it's going to work, is if the voices that we hear at these meetings are not just the people who live there, who are the homeowners that Rachel talked about, but people who want to live there and can't find a way.
I just posted to the chat a link to the city's website where you can see every single project document submitted to date. So I'd recommend going for all the pictures and the key details, looking at one of the more recent ZBA presentations that have been uploaded.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. I appreciate it.
Yeah, some of the things Michaela said that are so important, the positive things that she's talking about in this development, adding green space, adding affordable options. This is an underutilized space right now that's not going to have vibrancy. These are great things. And these are the kinds of things that you really want to bring up in addition to your own personal desire to either live somewhere or to be able to, stay in that community. So just really, it sounds like an amazing project. Sounds like a place I'd love to live. So let me go ahead and share my screen so we can finish up and get to the Q&A. A second. Okay, so getting back into making your voice heard. So again, going to meetings, Michaela described a long process. You don't have to go to every single one, but make sure you're part of it and you're staying with it. I've been part of a process now in Belmont. It's been going on for about 6 years. We're finally going to have a groundbreaking. I am so excited to see this thing happen. And I can't wait to see people moving into the homes. And hopefully with a lot of the changes that we're making at the state level and that you can be part of at the state and local levels, it won't be that long before something goes from concept to actually being built. The goal is that it doesn't take 6 years, that it's done much, much quicker. We need a lot of homes now. So we want to move more quickly. Other ways to weigh in. writing op-eds, opinion pieces, and letters to the editor. As we have less local newspapers, this can be more challenging, but look for opportunities in your community to be able to put out your thoughts on something, your thoughts on housing and why housing is needed, or why a particular project is good and what it would mean to you. Social media is a great way to obviously spread the word. There's a lot of local, Facebook groups and different ways that people are communicating in their communities, and use social media in a way that really grabs people's attention so that they are learning about it. And talking with your local officials is so incredibly important. I cannot stress this enough. Local officials, anybody in an elected office or an appointed office, there is a lot to be thinking about. And it's not even on purpose sometimes that they're not thinking about something, they're not necessarily hearing about it. And so when we are speaking up and we are raising a point that is outside of their personal experience, that is helping them to understand an issue in a different way. And that's really important for housing. As a town meeting member in my town, I don't get a ton of comments from people from my constituents. If someone writes to me about something, I am going to pay attention to that. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to make sure their voice is in my head when I'm going to vote. So we want to make sure that we are talking with our local officials. They really don't hear from people a lot. Then I want to let you all know about a way to plug into a lot of what's happening. So we need 200,000 homes in Massachusetts by the end of this decade. And we need homes across income levels. So CHAPA has started a multi-sector campaign. The Charles River Chamber, I'm so happy, is a part of it. And we are bringing people together to change the conversation at the state and local levels, to get people involved in their communities, to be that yes voice, to make the case for housing. We are giving people everything that they need, letting people know when are meetings happening in your community. When are you in an MBTA community? When is the vote happening? How can you participate? Who can you talk to? We are getting that information out along with talking points and really everything that people need to be able to participate locally, to weigh in and to make sure that our communities are hearing from all of us, and that our communities are putting the policies in place that are going to turn that graph around, that little bar chart I showed at the beginning of how housing production has been cut in half. We're going to turn that around. Together, we can actually create the homes that we need so that everybody has the ability to thrive, has the opportunity to thrive, and that we have wonderful neighborhoods that we all love so much, that we can preserve these great places. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up so that you all can ask questions and we can talk more than me presenting.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
No problem.
Great presentation. I definitely learned a lot. And I'm just going to open it up to some questions. It could be about the housing crisis, the Amputated Communities Act, specific things in specific towns, and we're happy to answer.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, as I understand it, the point is to increase supply so demand decreases and housing prices fall. But there's also the concern of, new high-end condos being built that leads to gentrification, which just leads to the rent increasing and things becoming less affordable. So do you have any tips of red flags to look out as somebody who's more of a layperson and doesn't know all of the vocabulary around housing, that it would be more of like a gentrifying kind of building versus a building that's actually going to supply housing?
Yeah, you bring up a really important point. When we are so far below what we need for housing in the state, anything that's added is going to look like luxury, right? First of all, the rules that we have set up have made the development process so challenging. Our local process actually is part of driving up the costs. So even if something isn't luxury, you may see luxury prices, right? And it's going to take a lot of production to actually even stabilize home prices and rents. So we're not talking about bringing them down, right? You got to stabilize it. Now, here's the thing. Stabilizing prices that are too high for too many people is not enough, right? We've got to be able to make sure that we're creating opportunities for people at different income levels. And that's why, our campaign is very much about the 200,000 homes we need, but let's talk about the 40,000 affordable at this income level, the 20,000 deeply affordable, Let's talk about home ownership. Let's talk about rental and supportive housing. And also another important point is preserving the homes that we've got. Because if we're adding more homes and we're losing anything, then we are still at an imbalance. So I think it's important to talk in your community that I want to stay here. I want to live here. The rents are way too high. We've got to be adding some homes here that people at different incomes can afford. And also just being part of that preservation strategy, whether it's an affordable housing development that we are hoping to hold on to and doesn't become market rate, or it's just your everyday homes that are around us that could very easily be lost. And one interesting thing to note about that is what you see in your neighborhoods today probably could not be recreated under our current rules. So in many neighborhoods, we have changed the zoning to the point where this was brought up in a meeting in Cambridge. Somebody on this call might have told me about it, where there was a house fire and this multifamily development burned down, could not be rebuilt to the current, to what it had been just last week, because the rules had changed. In my neighborhood, I live on a street of 2 families. It is not easy to build a 2-family home, right? So we're changing the rules. And I think it's important to look out for when you see proposals coming up. What is this doing exactly? We're increasing lot size requirements for a 2-family. To a layperson, that may not mean a whole lot, right? When you start to think about it, wait, that's going to mean you need a bigger piece of land to build something. This isn't going to be allowed here anymore. So we're actually going in the opposite direction, right? So I think it's important to talk about production at different levels, preserving what we've got, having rules that match what we actually see. That would be great, as well as rules that allow for more.
Awesome. Any other questions or even ideas that you guys have and want to share? I have one, Rachel. I was wondering what kind of tone should you use at at these municipal meetings? How do you speak to the board or to your town government, and what's most effective?
Not only am I an eternal optimist, and so I will always speak with an optimistic tone, but the data shows that speaking about the future, speaking about the kinds of values that we want for our community, these are winning arguments. We all want to live in a place where it's healthy and thriving, and our kids can, grow up here, and my parents can stay here. These are the kinds of things that actually connect with people, right? If you go to a local meeting, you'll see that there can be a lot of negativity. When people are worried about change, they're going to come out fighting, right? And I can't tell you what a difference it makes when someone's actually forward talking about the future and the future that we can create together. It is a complete game changer. And you can see the mood in the room change. You can see the comments that come after start to change. And that's when we're actually going to change the conversation and get to the point where we're allowing for the homes that we need.
Awesome. Thank
Be
you.
a ray of sunshine.
Go ahead. Yeah.
To me, it kind of seems like there's so many meetings to kind of get even one project passed, that especially when no one else is arriving, that kind of has a similar opinion, that it's a bit hard to keep coming back when the only other people there are negative. So is there, I don't know, how can we kind of try to make it easier?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think for this group, we want to create a community where we can send out really important housing municipal meetings that we should go to. So it's going to be a way, if you're trying to parse through the tens and meetings in different towns and a little bit confused, we hope to send out to this group consistently some important meetings that we think are worth extra attention, like the one on Wednesday. So that's one way to do it. I'm sure Rachel has some other.
Yeah, I agree. You don't have to go to every single one, right? I mean, this is part of the local process and why there's so many barriers for people to participate, right? Because there are people who will show up at every single one and continue to say no. And you'll see a change, amongst the decision makers when that's all they're hearing. So what are the important meetings to be at? bring a friend, bring a group. It is so much more fun to go to meetings when you're going with a neighbor and a friend. You're going for moral support. You're going out for a drink after for ice cream. You know, like make it fun, and really pay attention to what are the important meetings. Oh, we have a town meeting coming up. Is it an open town meeting? Can I go? Is it a representative town meeting? Who can I talk to? Is there something I can go to before that meeting? So, or before, before they actually decide on this. So it's not, I wouldn't say you suddenly have to go to every single meeting because that would be a lot, but make it fun when you're going, and know that you're having a real impact. And I think that helps a lot, to just see that when you show up, it makes a difference. There's also a lot more remote meetings that are happening these days, or hybrid meetings, which can make it easier for people to participate. And often the public comment section of a public meeting is at a specific point, and that is usually on the agenda. So you can know that maybe I'll be there for the first like 30 minutes, and then, I'm going to listen in, or I'll check back and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely great points, Rachel. And before some other questions, and I see your hand, Luke, I wanted to have Josh from Housing for All Watertown speak a little bit about his local housing advocacy group and what they've been doing so far, because I think it is a good case study for young people to get into housing advocacy. Josh?
Thanks, Max, and thanks everyone for putting this event on and for letting me speak. And just to kind of build on what Rachel was saying quickly, like super one and plus one, the remote meetings where you can like wash dishes, on mute, and then weigh in when it's time to weigh in, and then go back to washing dishes or whatever else is that you're doing afterwards. So I live in the east end of Watertown, lived here since 2018. First got involved in housing advocacy, kind of motivated by a lot of the same things that Rachel was talking about. I actually read, I promise I had this on my bookshelf, the Neighborhood Defenders book that Rachel was alluding to, that BU academic research was really motivating to me because it just showed so clearly how unrepresentative these city meetings are. And had kind of been getting a little bit involved in city politics, and helped to work on a city council campaign previously, and had seen how much impact a single voice, a single person showing up can actually have in these kinds of meetings, especially given, honestly, the kind of relentless negativity that you see from a lot of the regulars at these meetings. And so I showed up at a meeting in summer of 2022 when there was a group that was trying to push a zoning change to rezone, or to categorize Watertown Square as a historic district in what was a pretty kind of transparent effort to prevent development there. And I went and I said, I think this is a bad idea. I think we need more housing. Housing is connected to all of these different things, including affordability, including climate and public health, and small businesses, and met someone else at that meeting who I had not coordinated going with, but who said something similar, and was like, oh, cool, we should stay in touch. And over the next few months, with him and with my wife and another friend of ours, we just started meeting and said, hey, maybe we could turn this into a group, because we all kind of recognize the importance of this work. And just started having conversations with folks around town, and it sort of snowballed from there, to the point where we now have an email list. I think it's almost 300 people, because there really is this kind of untapped resource. Rachel kind of alluded to the focus groups that you all have done, and how it's like, oh, 85% of people are actually in support of more housing. I think we really were kind of successfully tapping into that. And honestly, what we do, we don't like overthink it too much. We lift up the important meetings in Watertown. We give people the kind of good, kind of clear, positive talking points, saying this is what you should mention. Here are the things that we want to emphasize, or the things that we think are potentially at risk of losing if we don't speak in favor of them. And then we just are super disciplined, honestly. We just keep going to meetings. And unfortunately, it is kind of a slog. There's this one development in Watertown Square that basically took all of 2023, from the initial community meetings in January through the final ZBA development, or ZBA approval. I want to say it's like September or October or something, but it was just a lot of folks showing up at meetings consistently. And one of the other things that we were talking about was this community aspect of the work. We've really invested in that. We have a very active Discord server. Jamie Gordon, who I think might be on this call, leads our kind of community building work, and we have happy hours before meetings. We get together and kind of socialize. We have things that are completely unrelated to housing, and it's I think for a lot of people who are interested in building community, just a neat opportunity to do that, and that then just builds on itself, where people know that they're going to see their friends at these kinds of meetings. But the big thing that I want to leave folks with is like, it really does matter. This is not national politics where there are super PACs and there are expensive lobbyists and people who are trying to sway the elected officials. Local leaders really are very responsive to what they're hearing from their constituents. And they really do pay super close attention to what people say at meetings, what people say to them on the street. And you can have a really outsized impact by just talking about the need for more housing, about that kind of positive vision for the future. And so I think we've had, I think, a lot of success in our relatively short time doing this, and want to just encourage other folks to look for opportunities to do that in your communities as well.
Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you for all the work you do. It's really awesome to see people getting young professionals involved. So any other questions? I know Luke raised his hand earlier. Any other questions for either Josh or Rachel or myself? Yes, Ned, I saw your hand raised.
Sorry, I didn't want to skip anybody. This is a bit more of a shameless plug. So I'm actually over in Cambridge, and I live right next to the triple decker that burned down that I think Rachel was referencing. And that was actually an interesting story because, like Rachel said, that would be an illegal rebuild under like the current rules. But, you know, because of like variances and that sort of thing, they were able to rebuild it. It's a minority-owned building, so it's kind of a lesson in like generational wealth and how these regulations are often an impediment to that because you have to be the most connected and the most lawyered up to actually kind of weave through these. And I do just want to shamelessly plug a Better Cambridge, like the Watertown group. You know, they're doing a lot of great things. There's a really important vote and series of votes coming up this fall, probably one of the most important in, excuse me, in U.S. history when it comes to housing. Cambridge is going to legalize multifamily citywide, and with up to 6 feet and then, or sorry, 6 stories and up to 9 stories for affordable. So it could really, really change the landscape in Cambridge. So awesome job to all the other groups. Highly recommend people join their local group, their local housing group. A Better Cambridge is one of those. So, and thank you to Rachel for this presentation.
Thank you, Ned. Luke, did you want to talk as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on William's comment about the seemingly endless series of meetings. I think the other angle there, not just to add another item to the to-do list, is to do both project level advocacy and then policy level advocacy to end the need for quite so much project level advocacy. And so obviously this is like part of things like the MBTA Communities Act, like having more things be available, you know, by right. And I think that's what Ned's talking about Cambridge doing, of having, you know, when we talk about legalizing things, we're typically meaning that you can do things by right without as much or any public involvement. But I think, you know, we here in Newton, you know, I'm part of Newton for Everyone. We're kind of focused more on that kind of policy side, as opposed to, you know, our friends and allies, Engine 6, are very focused on project level advocacy. So both of these things are important, but I wanted to just kind of mention the kind of policy level one, maybe than local level, although I think there are local SABC shows opportunities for that as well. But I just wanted to toss that into the mix as something to be considered.
Thank you, Luke. And Rachel?
Yeah, just to respond to that, that is right on. We need both, but the way to make these processes clearer and easier is to have by right zoning, to set the rules, form-based code. There are lots of things that can be done that set the rules so that developers will build what they're allowed to build. You know, often I hear from people that developers are bad and they're just building all these fancy apartments that, you know, don't meet my needs. Honestly, that's because of the process that we've created that has directed them to produce a particular product that may not actually align with everything that we need. And when we set the rules and show as a community what it is that we want and what we prioritize, it is so much easier to get the development done. I would also say it makes life better for the people who are on planning boards to actually focus on where can we make decisions rather than every single detail of a project, which is part of what can drive up the cost. So thank you for bringing that up, Luke. And I think you are so right. You need the advocacy on both levels. And at Better Cambridge has been doing some great work, like you were saying, on the policy level as well.
Thank you, Rachel. Maybe we can take one more question if anyone has one. Yes, Sandra.
Hi. So most of the condo buildings that are in the process of being approved or built in our communities will mostly be available just for rent. And in my opinion, it puts corporate America get in the way of reaching the American dream of owning a house. And how can we at a local level make it easier for developers build apartments that will give right of ownership for those who are ready to buy? And we speak not just of first-time home buyers, but also downsizers who want to live in the same community but don't really have options.
Yeah, that's another really great point to bring up. Homeownership is very difficult to achieve when there's not enough options, right? So one, just to note, there's a couple of changes that have been made at the state level through the Affordable Homes Act, which will actually help with the resources to create more homeownership opportunities. One is funding for the Commonwealth Builder, which is a homeownership production program at Mass Housing. I saw we have someone from Mass Housing on the meeting, and it's focused on building homeownership in gateway cities and in the city of Boston, really communities of color, and narrowing the racial homeownership gap. There's also a new homeownership production tax credit that is just being created. So this is in the Affordable Homes Act that will create a tool to provide some of the revenue, bring in some of the financing that developers need. There's a lot you can do at the local level as well. In your housing production plans, if your community has one, if you don't, advocate for one. Stating that as a need that has been identified. How is your community using Community Preservation Act or CPA dollars? Is that a way that the community is actually offering up some money to help a developer build those projects? So think about, there's a lot of different ways, both at the local level to state that this is a priority, to fund it, and then some of the policies happening at the state level. And then there's also down payment assistance programs that were just funded through the Affordable Homes Act as well. And hopefully those will be available soon to help people compete in the market right now, and as more opportunities are being created.
Thank you, Rachel. So just to wrap it up, I think we've had a lot of information.
Can I just interrupt 1 second and just expand on that? I thought that was a really important point that she just raised, is that a lot of the development is going to become rentals. You know, like everyone's for more housing, but then, you know, you can't control what kind of, you could have, like say in XYZ town, you know, you can be for it, but all the developers that are coming in are going to put in rentals. It's not going to be condos as much. And you have to look at the companies like BlackRock and some of these huge companies across the, you know, that are buying up all these properties across the country. They're turning them into rentals. They want people to rent. They can raise rates, you know, rents as they go year over year. So people think it's a panacea to have all this housing because, oh, great, our seniors can, you know, downsize and still have home ownership. But I don't think it's going to be the case. I really don't. Maybe I'm being negative on it, but it's just a reality, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of different perspectives, and I think, you know, this conversation was illuminating a lot of things, not just housing and home ownership and everything. I don't think we have any time for any more comments, sadly, but I did want to end up saying there's, you know, like we learned about a lot, but if you could leave with one thing, I think besides like the knowledge of the housing crisis and how to advocate, it's what this group can be. And we really want the people on this call and the people who signed up for this event to be able to come together and advocate on specific projects that we can hope to rally around certain meetings in at least our 4 communities. However, it could expand to other communities as well. And we will be adding everyone on this call to an email list. And of course, we'll be following up after this event. But in the future, we'll be sending like very important housing decisions that will be coming in our 4 communities, which are Needham, Newton, Wellesley, and Watertown, and maybe some others. So hopefully we can come together and make a difference. At the same time, I really wanted to plug next Wednesday's meeting at Newton City Hall. It's really important. This is a almost 300 unit apartment building that is going to have a lot of income restricted units. That means units that have to be affordable. And it's really important for Newton. And this project has received a lot of opposition and can use a lot of community support. So it would be great to have some young professionals in the room speaking about what this means for their future and how they want to live in Newton one day. Even if you don't live in Newton, or even if you don't work in Newton, you can come and say, I want to live in Newton, I want to work in Newton, but I can't. And we will be sending an email that has all the details about that. And I really hope to see everyone there. Okay, so thank you all for attending. That's all we have today. If anyone, yeah, so I appreciate everyone coming. We will be sending a follow-up email. Thank you to CHAPA for presenting. Thank you to Rachel. Thank you to everyone who shared their thoughts. Thank you to Whitney for helping organize this. And I hope to see you all soon at a town meeting. Thank you.